Good morning and welcome to the Juniper Center Thrive Live, featuring conversations with guests, really great guests, to help clinicians and everyday people thrive and also to normalize conversations around mental health, one of my favorite things to do. I'm your host, Dr. Margot Jacot. I'm the founder and chief care officer at the Juniper Center, and I'm so glad you're joining us today. I do hope that you'll say hello in the comments if you'd like to. We'd love to know that you're there. Also, feel free to throw up some questions as well. Today's guest, I'm so happy. I love all of our guests, I have to say. Today's guest, I'm so excited to be able to have this conversation. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Valerie Rein. And Valerie is a psychologist and women's mental health expert. She discovered the Patriarchy Stress Disorder, PSD, and created a science-backed system for helping women achieve their ultimate success, happiness, and fulfillment by healing, and this is so fabulous, the intergenerational trauma of oppression. Folks, you're going to love this. She wrote the book Patriarchy Stress Disorder, The Invisible Barrier to Women's Happiness and Fulfillment, and there is lots of stuff on her website. She has a podcast, a blog, a community in the jailbreak curriculum, which there's a lot about being, sort of bound and jailed by some of these historical concepts. This is to help women heal from the effects of epigenetic trauma, and we'll talk about epigenetics if you don't happen to know what that means. I love the discussion and that intersection of science and mental health and the nervous system, so I'm really looking forward to this today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Valerie Rein to the Juniper Center Thrive Live. Good morning, Valerie. How are you?
Good morning. So good to be with you, Margot.
Well, wonderful to have you. Thank you for agreeing to do this today. So again, folks, if you are out there, please feel free to hop on. Let us know you're there. Say hi. If you have a comment, put it in the comments box. We'd love to know that you're there. This will also be available after the fact on YouTube, so folks can catch up if they didn't get to see it live. So Valerie, there's so much to talk about here.
Yes.
Right? But I thought, maybe just starting with your story would be a good place to begin, because your story is great. And boy, and I'd love for you to also talk about how so many of us women have to really like crash and burn and have this crisis before we really can realize that we need to do something profound in our lives. So can you tell us a bit about your story?
Of course. My story began when I was little and my life was defined by the question, what's wrong with me? So to answer that question, I went on to study psychology. And after 2 graduate degrees, I thought I really had it all. I was doing the work I loved. I had a thriving private practice in New York. I had a family. I had a home. And one day I was on the phone with a client when I noticed I was smiling only with the right side of my face. And the left side of my face just hung in there, as did my left arm. And I ended up in the ER with symptoms that presented as symptoms of a stroke. So it was really scary. And after scanning me up and down for many hours, they gave me the official diagnosis of just stress, which was a huge relief. And also it hugely puzzled me because I actually did not feel stressed. I felt exactly the way I felt pretty much my entire life. So that was something to grapple with and try to understand how come my body was literally shutting down, but I didn't feel the stress I was carrying. And what was creating this stress in the life that was so good, felt so good, and looked so good on paper. So that was one question. And another one was even more uncomfortable because as the security blanket of stress was slipping, underneath it was that same question, what's wrong with me? It was alive and well. Years of therapy, years of self-help and achievement haven't erased it. It was just muted with all the stress and workaholism. So I started wondering, how come my clients were shifting out of this numbness and disconnection into the fullness of their lives, and I was still stuck. What was I doing for them that I wasn't doing for me? And the answer was that with all of my clients, I was using mind body trauma healing tools, even if they didn't didn't think they had any traumatic experiences. They had quote unquote normal childhoods, normal lives, and yet they were all showing this telltale symptom of trauma, which is disconnection from parts of themselves, from parts of their bodies, from their authentic desires, from their fullest authentic lives. And of course, my disconnection had to really up the ante to for me to see that yes, I too had trauma. And then the question became, what kind of trauma could we all have and not even talk about it, not even be aware of it? And at the time, research in the field of epigenetics was coming out showing that trauma is genetically transmitted. And that was that light bulb moment. Oh, women have been oppressed for thousands of years. Our bodies did not belong to us. We couldn't make our own choices. We couldn't love who we loved. We certainly couldn't make money. We certainly couldn't make an impact. And every time a woman reached for her authenticity, for her desires, for her power, she was punished. And so here we are living in the world where we have a lot more opportunity. And every time we reach for more power, for more authenticity, that trauma that lives in our subconscious pipes up and signals unsafe, 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 creating this overload of stress in the system of high achieving women, which we're not even aware of because it feels normal.
It's normal. Exactly. Oh, that's fabulous, Valerie. So, can you just describe for a moment for those who don't know what epigenetics is? Can you just describe how that
Mm.
works, please?
Yes, epigenetics is a science that looks at the genetic expression and looks at malleability of that genetic expression. Before epigenetics came on the scene, the conventional belief was that your genes are your destiny. Whatever you're born with, that's it. It cannot change. And now we're seeing that, yes, genetic expression does change when we change our lifestyle, when we do healing work, the expression changes. And those changes are also genetically transmitted. So we're changing not only our destiny, but the path of our generations.
Yeah, which is fascinating. I mean, for those of you who have worked, if you're therapists out there, and if you have worked with um, people who were Holocaust survivors, I mean, that's, I think, the sort of the hallmark research, but there's
Mm.
lots of other research too. Can you talk about the research with the mice and the cherry blossoms? I
Yeah.
love that. That's fabulous because for generations then, these poor mice are struggling just with the scent. So can you describe that, please?
Yes, Margot, this is such fascinating research, and it shows that traumatic experiences are transmitted even if they're not near the scale of the Holocaust experience. So it really frames it in okay, our day to day traumatic experiences change our DNA expression and are transmitted to new generations. In this study, researchers introduced the smell of cherry blossoms to mice while simultaneously zapping their feet with mild electric shocks. These mice were then bred, and their children and grandchildren, when exposed to the smell of cherry blossoms, showed a strong fear and anxiety reaction. For me, it is a reflection of how PSD operates. PSD is women fearing the smell of cherry blossoms. And what that is for us is everything that we deeply, authentically desire that has been historically prohibited and punishable for women under patriarchy. Loving who we love, speaking our truth, expressing ourselves unapologetically in our sexuality and in our brilliance, making money, making an impact in the world.
Mhm.
And every time we reach for these cherry blossoms, we're either able to go through facing the headwinds of our nervous system signaling unsafe, 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 and all the negative outcomes that it carries with it, our health expressions, the negative self-talk, um, distractions, addictive behaviors, everything that is trying to keep us safe from those mortal dangers, right?
Mhm.
Or um, they are keeping us safe, successfully keeping us safe, and women find themselves frozen and unable to move forward to create a life that they authentically desire, and they don't understand why they're stuck, and they're just heartbreaking because they're trying to fix what's not broken. They're trying to fix themselves. What's wrong with me? That same
Yep.
age-old question.
Oh, I love that, Valerie, right? Because I mean, certainly you've had clients like this. I've had clients like this, women who come in, and it's not just women. I mean, folks always say, well, wait, men experience this too. Yes, but perhaps for some different reasons. There is the element of what we experienced ourselves, not just what our
Yeah.
biology or where our genetic expression
Mm-hmm.
is, but this is still happening now for a lot of folks, this feeling of not good enough. And women
Yes.
are faced daily with being told repeatedly, we don't have choice. We can't make
Yes.
choices for our own bodies. And I'm not going to get into that, but we can't make, you're too much, you're not enough. If you're too ambitious, you're kind of narcissistic and bitchy, and,
Yeah.
all of these kinds of things. We've been told this over and over and over again in our own
Yes.
lives. So, Valerie, can you speak a little bit to that? Because I can imagine some folks saying, well, but, yeah, I had that overtly in my life.
Yeah.
So how can I tell that it's my epigenetics? And I think part of what you're saying is, but not everybody has that as overtly. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I I see the core wound of PSD is the wound of worthlessness.
Worthlessness, yes.
Women have been, without a shadow of a doubt, communicated that their lives, our bodies, our
Mhm.
minds are worth less. They're worth less than men's. Period. End of story. That's the whole ethos of patriarchy. That's the whole foundation of its economics, its morality. Women have been excluded from power on the basis of not being good enough, basically being worth less. And it's harsh truth, and it's really hard to deny it. Although, of course, some people want to deny it because even for women, it's too painful to admit. It's just too painful to face.
Mhm.
And I want to say that even for women who feel very confident and very competent. They have their mindset all figured out. They're going for it. They're not immune to it. It is just showing up in different ways. We have a real epidemic of autoimmune conditions. We have a real epidemic of dissatisfaction and a lack of fulfillment, even among those who are achieving at a high level, and on paper their lives look really, really good. And again, it's not women's fault. It's that the nervous system interprets success as dangerous, as threatening. So, ironically, the more visible we are, the
Mhm.
more money we make, the more impactful our work is in the world, the more our nervous system is on edge. So, we actually need to consciously engage in retraining, rewiring our nervous system, because it's not a life sentence. It doesn't have to be that way. But our
Mhm.
nervous system literally needs to upgrade, because what we have now, it's like entering Formula One, driving a Toyota Corolla. We have vehicles that are our bodies and our nervous systems that
Right.
have been calibrated for a pretty small, limited life, because women didn't have an opportunity for anything else. And it doesn't mean that we're not capable. We're more than capable. We just need to upgrade our engines so that we don't burn out. We are just going pedal to the metal, but we are overheating and it's just too much. And I think what you also brought up here and pointed at is are the intersections of different traumatic experiences. So of course, everyone experiences trauma. In my book, the way I see trauma is it's a human experience. Anything that made us feel unsafe while not being in control and created trauma adaptations. And that unsafety could have been physical or emotional, psychological, right? That could have been imprinted as traumatic. And everyone has that regardless of their gender. And people have a lot of intersections of intergenerational experience, traumatic experiences as well. White supremacy, racism is a huge intergenerational trauma, of course. And for women of color, the intersections of PSD and the trauma of racism are very significant. And for folks who are LGBTQ, although this may not have the intergenerational component, but the trauma that they experience in the world, the trauma of oppression is certainly very present. And there are just so many aspects of both the traumas of oppression, collective traumas, and individual traumatic experiences that don't have to be big and life-threatening, but they're still there. And over time, the trauma adaptations, ways that we cope with them, become our personality, become the way we act and move through the world. And our lives become less shiny, less
They're dull.
pretty. Yeah. And it's not our fault. That I keep coming back to this message that it is not our failure. There's nothing wrong with us. We just need to understand how trauma works in our systems and how to heal it.
Exactly, Valerie. I think that's very well said. So, it's so hard to tease this stuff apart because so many people, because of their race, their religion, their gender, there's a multitude of intersections, all that intersectionality. Um, all of these pieces can add to it. And there's traumas that are happening along the way. And I'll tell you, I've had experiences with clients where they've come in and they've said, I've been working on my trauma for years, but it's repressed. I can't figure out what it is. I mean, this is a really common thing. And it might be that, and they have been told by a previous therapist, or they have come to believe themselves that they have some sexual abuse trauma, and they might. It happens. And then people don't remember it. So I'm not disputing that at all.
Yes.
However, then when they describe their lives, they say, well, I had a really pretty good childhood. I don't know who would have done this to me. And it's frequently women. And there's a sense of, everything was really pretty okay. I must have really blocked it all out. And the thought is, well, if there's so much from what the research has said about horrible things like the Holocaust or mice with cherry blossom, right? Just the scent of cherry blossom. Imagine for women living throughout all of history being told we were worth less. Right? I mean, so how could that not have an impact? And so those are some of the women that you're talking about too, who say, I had a great life, but I am so stressed out, or I have all these PTSD symptoms. Something else must have happened to me. And what I say to people right away is, let's stop hunting for what happened. Let's just deal with what is, right? Because well, what is it? And I think this is another way for people to make sense of it for sure. But Valerie, what you said is so important. You take people right into their bodies to work with them. So how do you go about doing that? Because as we know, you can't just walk your way through trauma. It lives in your system, your nervous system. So how do you take people through that?
Absolutely. Yes, I'll be happy to kind of take a bird's eye view on the process. And I want to really highlight what you were speaking about. You were actually describing what I was going through when I was in therapy early on, trying to understand why I was experiencing these symptoms. And I thought maybe I had some trauma I did not remember. Maybe I had repressed it. And I was hunting and searching because my symptoms did not make sense in the context of my life. And of course, now understanding epigenetics, it's a shocking thing to consider, but for generations and generations of women, most of the sexual experiences have been unwanted. A woman's sexual experience for most of the history had to do with rape, or at at the milder end of the spectrum, um, it was just not a good experience.
And it was
Like,
duty, right? It was just your duty as a wife, and you
it
were
was a
told,
duty.
girl, this
It,
is your job. It's part of your wifely duty. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. It was that duty. And it's huge trauma that we've inherited. And so if you're having difficulties with your sexual expression, with arousal, with orgasm, with just feeling in your body, when you're having sex, it's not your personal issue. I mean, it's bigger than you. You might have had your own experiences that were traumatic. And there's a big context that we all inherited. So I just really want to validate it for women. You are not alone if you are dealing with this. And to your question, how we work with this in the body. Well, first of all, we create safety. And how we create safety is through using mind body tools to actually regulate the nervous system. So that's one aspect of creating safety. And another aspect is, of course, being in a safe environment. I view SPSD as a collective trauma. My take on it is that collective trauma requires collective healing. And when we gather with other women on this journey, and we're all engaging with these tools, we are regulating our nervous systems together. We're validating each other's experiences. We experienced firsthand, not because so and so says it or because you read it in my book, or, oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me, it's collective trauma. But when you are in an environment, in a group of women who are experiencing the same they share the same experience, although they're from all over the world, they're from all walks of life. For example, I grew up in the Soviet Union behind the Iron Curtain. And just to give you an idea, we had no information from the West, no influences at all. Yet, what I heard growing up from the women in my life was exactly word for word
Same
the
thing.
same patriarchal programming that women growing up in Australia or South America received. So it's deep, right? It affects us all. So when we're doing this healing in a community, that creates a lot of safety and it really accelerates healing. I also see it as collective acupuncture. When one of us touches that pain point, those who have not even been aware of this pain point go, oh, yes.
Yeah.
And one of us finds safety in this particular area. And then
Right.
there's secondary safety that is created in the community. And the community goes, oh, yes, I get to do this too. I get to speak to this. I get to show up like this. So it's really magical. So these are the key ingredients of healing, if you will. And as far as our tools are concerned, we look at what's validated by neuroscience, which is very fascinating these days. Neuroscience tells us that our actions are decided in our subconscious. So here we are paying so much attention to what we think. And yes, it is important to pay attention to what you think. And what you think does not define your destiny, does not define your actions. Turns out your actions are actually driven by your subconscious. So using the tools and practices that help you connect with your subconscious through your body directly, because that is the direct route. The body does not lie. The body doesn't make up stories. The body doesn't forget. And learning the language of your body to get you in touch with your subconscious and with that true experience, that is the path that we use on this healing journey.
I love that. And, what was just occurring to me, Valerie, is that as women are trying to figure out, well, what's wrong with me? And of course, your work is saying, this isn't your fault. Nothing is wrong with you. That's not what's happening. They feel like they're making it up if there isn't a good reason because we are
Yes.
worth less. So we don't even get to just have the experience of having this trauma. So, if anyone is interested, and I think you have some great tools on your website, but also Peter Levine's work in
Yes.
somatic experiencing and the polyvagal theory, who,
Yes.
all Deb Dana has done a lot of really good interpretation of that. So those would be some places to go as well. But I highly, highly recommend your book, Patriarchy Stress Disorder, The Invisible Barrier to Women's Happiness and Fulfillment. So folks, please go get yourself a copy. I think your description of trauma and adaptations is fantastic. It's very easy to read. You talk about common adaptations, or for a lot of women, it becomes workaholism. So this is
Yes.
important. Right? This is really important for people to be thinking about. So is there anything you'd like our viewers to take with them? One final thought.
Yeah, thank you so much for this, Margot. And of course, um, understanding that you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. And please don't let this conversation, if it resonated with you, don't let it stay at the level of, oh, that was interesting. I heard something interesting today.
Right, that was interesting. Go look it up to dig in a little bit.
Yes, get into this. Get on your healing journey. On my website, you can actually download the first chapter of the book, and you can download some starter practices to just start experiencing this. So that's drvalerie.com/book. And we have community experiences that we hold a couple of times a year. The Thriving Experience, thrivingexperience.com is where you can learn more and register. They're free to attend. And we have the next one coming up in October. And what is truly magical about this, and you can see the testimonials of women who find the experience itself life-changing, even not getting into deeper work, that the 3 days that we spend uncovering and getting into these layers, busting the myths that somehow we're messed up, coming out of the silos of shame around these things, and also learning the practical tools that help our nervous system shift from survival to thriving right there and then. That is very powerful. So the thrivingexperience.com, I would love to see you there, give you a huge virtual hug. And together, it is not just life-changing work, it is truly a world-changing work, because what we are accomplishing here, as you are healing your trauma, the way you're showing up in the world transforms. Your family transforms, your children, if you have children, transform, your work in the world. You are carrying the safety in your body and permission, not only for you, but for others to show up authentically and be who they are.
Right? Which is really what this is all about. It's what therapy is about. And hopefully it's what being on the planet is about, is that we get to bring our whole selves and have a safe place to exist. So Dr. Valerie Rein, thank you so much for joining me today. Please, everyone, go get the book. Again, Dr. Valerie is the founder of the Patriarchy Stress Disorder Theory. This is an original theory. Really great book, wonderful conversation. Go look at the website, and maybe you can participate in the October event. I'm Dr. Margot Jacot, owner and director of the Juniper Center. So glad to have you today, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Be well, everyone.
Thank you so much.